Welcome back to the Pearl Report. The Sino-British Joint Declaration provided for a mini-constitution for Hong Kong, but the drafting of the Basic Law was disrupted by a bloody crackdown on pro-democracy student activists in Beijing. June 4th wreaked havoc to preparations for Hong Kong's handover. The shopping hub of Beijing has an affluent capitalistic atmosphere favorably compared with Hong Kong. In the Joint Declaration, China promised the Basic Law for Hong Kong to legally enshrine what wasn't spelled out in the negotiations. To encourage Hong Kongers to support a Basic Law, prominent pan-democrats were roped into the drafting committee.
If the Basic Law could not enjoy more support from the Hong Kong people than the Joint Declaration, then they, the Chinese drafters, would consider it to be their failure. That was a very encouraging remark. So I was very happy in working with them.
The Lok Ma Chau border. Martin Lee says he came to inspect it for the first time in the 1980s. He was a Basic Law drafter at the time and a legislative councillor. Today, he sees rapid development in Shenzhen and recalls a speech by Deng Xiaoping.
On an occasion when we were drafting the Basic Law in Beijing, I believe on the 16th of April, 1987, Deng Xiaoping gave us a lecture. He said something very interesting at the time. He said, if 50 years should prove not to be enough for you, we could give you another 50 years. He wanted Hong Kong to remain up high, and China would just catch up. He said, all right, you could have another 50 years, meaning they, the rest of China, would have another 50 years to catch up with us.
But things started changing only 5 years after the signing of the Joint Declaration.
The final product could have been much better, but for the Tiananmen Square massacre in '89, because there were altogether 3 drafts of the Basic Law. That was a good measure, without which I believe Hong Kong's confidence could have crumbled.
With China's political turmoil, Britain brought Hong Kong's problems to the G7 summit. The leaders there believed international support was crucial to maintain Hong Kong's confidence. The mainland pro-democracy protests of 1989 reawakened Hong Kong people's fear of communism. Martin Lee and 3 other Basic Law drafters quit. The public wanted democratization speeded up with direct elections to LegCo. Alan Lee proposed a numerical consensus. After the June 4th crackdown, the Hong Kong General Chamber of Commerce met with visiting British parliamentarians. Even the relatively conservative Vincent Lo wanted democracy sooner.
喺目前咁嘅情況之下，香港係應該將我哋嗰個民主化嘅係提前嘅。
Along with Democrats and moderates, Vincent Lo devised the 4-4-2 formula, which included increasing directly elected seats in LegCo.
That was after the tragedy of June 4th in Tiananmen. Hong Kong was really devastated. And I guess everybody believed that if we can come up with some form of consensus on our political system going forward, that could instill some confidence in Hong Kong. So everyone was prepared to compromise and agree on a consensus formula. Of course there was pressure because both countries would want their own position preserved. But we just have to do what we believe is best for Hong Kong at that time. That's how I proceeded with that discussion.
确实，国际上有一些人想要把香港成为一个颠覆我们社会主义国家，来攻击我们共产党的领导的这样一个基地。
In the shadow of June 4th, China and Britain restarted negotiations. They agreed to enshrine in the Basic Law a small rise in directly elected seats. Britain sent Chris Patten as Hong Kong's last governor. He unleashed political reforms, becoming democracy incarnate.
Chris Patten was the first to challenge the Sino-British Declaration.
Zhou was then the director of the Xinhua News Agency in Hong Kong, the central government's top representative. Chris Patten was accused of 3 violations of the Joint Declaration, of the Basic Law, and of Sino-British diplomatic agreements.
Where in the Basic Law does it tell me what to do about the 9 new functional constituencies?
彭定康先生将来历史上要成为香港的千古罪人。
Sino-British ties collapsed. Zhou resisted even shaking hands with Chris Patten.
Sensitive opportunism. He saw the storm in the British regime. He complained about the Mandarins in the British Foreign Ministry, and even the Thatcher government of being too lenient with the Chinese and conceding too much on Hong Kong's problems. He suffered losses and wanted to counterattack.
Believing that they suffered losses, they wanted to get what they couldn't get from talks 10 years earlier.
Qin Zuo-er was China's representative in the Sino-British Joint Liaison Group. This was where the group had met in Hong Kong. Britain always criticized the group as China's means of an earlier takeover of Hong Kong. About the stationing of troops, the Court of Final Appeal, and Hong Kong's annual budget. The two nations were at loggerheads. In his memoirs, Qin Zuo-er described his work as a path bristling with thorns. He criticized the Hong Kong government for increasing social welfare spending.
I said such rapid increase in welfare is planting landmines in the future Hong Kong. If this rapid development persists, it's like a sports car careening along a precipitous road, carrying 6 million Hong Kong citizens, and the driver is you, Chris Patten.
As Sino-British relations deteriorated, China set up a preparatory committee to handle transitional affairs. Rita Fan was in it. She had been an appointed legislator, but quit when Chris Patten came to Hong Kong.
I find that his interest is mostly political. I cannot agree with the way that he seems to indicate how he will deal with China. After the handover, the Western countries have been very interested in Hong Kong's political development. We see that, but as time goes by, a wide spectrum of affairs, the Basic Law was implemented. So at first, the US Congress said that they would want to have a report. And the British government also have this sort of half-yearly report about how Hong Kong is progressing, how the Joint Declaration is being implemented.
Hong Kong people also became increasingly dissatisfied with the Hong Kong and Beijing governments. On July 1st, 2003, 500,000 people marched in protest. In 2006, demonstrators opposed demolishing the landmark Star Ferry Pier. In 2012, mass rallies against a national education school subject. In the past 3 decades since the Joint Declaration was signed, a groundswell of discontent has encompassed all walks of life. As the common values of democracy and freedom take root in Hong Kong, people want more power to decide on their own future.
It's just Hong Kong is totally politicized, and the divisiveness in our community, that's very worrying. And it's not a pleasant environment to live in. There is a lot of discontent, particularly for the young people. We are supposed to be very affluent, but look at the way people are living. They see no future, no prospect for themselves. You know, it's forcing some of the young to become more rebellious.
It's never been easy to find a point of balance between these different views. I don't think that is unique to Hong Kong, that if you looked at the political life of any advanced society, anywhere else in the world, you would find that very often there is a polarization, there is a difficulty over achieving a consensus.
Earlier, the central government released a white paper saying one country, two systems should be seen in the context of national security. That sparked worries whether the promised high degree of autonomy is being limited. Rita Fan says Hong Kong is an arena in the contest between China and the West.
The Foreign Affairs Ministry made a public statement that Hong Kong should not be used by external powers to become the bridgehead to cause problem for China or to split up China.
Martin Lee notes the Joint Declaration is registered with the United Nations. Western countries should be concerned about democracy as it's a universal value.
All these governments which supported the one country, two systems and still support it owe to the Hong Kong people at least a moral obligation to speak up on our behalf when something's going wrong.
The Joint Declaration enshrined a framework for Hong Kong, but after 30 years, people are still seeking consensus on the details of one country, two systems.
If with this community split that we see today, it will get worse before it gets better. I think one day our leadership in Beijing said, what the hell is going on in Hong Kong? If they want to implement the way they think about how Hong Kong should be ruled, and I think we are doomed.
Well, thank you for watching our show. It will be re-aired on Tuesday and Saturday, as well as on tvb.com. Next week, a long disbanded political group personifies Hong Kong's polarized politics. Until then, from the Pearl Report team, good night, good luck, and good health.